guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. Today I wanted to bring you some writerly inspiration slash confidence slash wisdom and bring you 9 writing pep talks in however long this video is going to be. I don't know, 15 minutes? I wanted to provide some hype. I get a lot of questions from people, questions that have to do with general icky lack of confidence feels, and that's never fun, but we all end up there at some point. I've been there many times. I wanted to share some wisdom for you guys and kind of give you 9 pep talks for the most common problems that people seem to have, and one that's a problem that I seem to have. Number 1, your story being difficult to write doesn't mean that the end result is going to be bad. I think this is kind of a psychology thing that people fall into a lot, where we assume that it being difficult means it's going to be bad because we have negative associations with the process, so of course the end result would be bad, but that's not necessarily true. Just because something feels difficult to accomplish doesn't mean that the end result is going to be bad. Don't equate your feelings towards your process with the quality of the end result, because the quality could be great, but that could be muddled a little and it could feel like it's bad because it was hard to write. I think this is something that I've noticed a lot, where I kind of just inherently feel like stories or scenes that were easy and kind of just came out in like a flow state, I think are good. Whereas stories that were really hard to write and that I struggled with and that took a lot of effort and seemed like I could never get them right, even when I eventually do get it in kind of a good place, I feel like it's bad because it was so hard to write. Number 2, that said, something being difficult doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Here's kind of a fact for you. Writing a book is hard. It's an objectively difficult task. You have to assemble this really abstract collection of thoughts and make it coherent and interesting, and that's hard. There's a reason why almost everyone has an idea for a book, but very few people actually write a book in their lifetime because it was so difficult that they didn't have the passion to kind of overcome how hard it was. Like, it didn't matter so much to them that it was worth going through that battle. If it's worth going through that battle for you, even if it's a difficult battle, it's worth it. Lots of things in life are going to be difficult. Doesn't mean they're not worth doing. Like they say, Rome was not built in a day. Your book's not going to be built in a day, and it's going to maybe take a couple tears. It's going to stress you out at points. It's going to be hard at points. That's fine. That's kind of what makes it worth it in the end. If it was super easy, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't be as satisfying when you finally got it right. Number 3, everyone else seems like a better writer than you because you don't have to experience their struggle. Every artist struggles with their work, and you are going to have moments where you struggle with your work and you have to deal with that struggle. But when someone else types up something and you read it and you're like, holy shit, this is so good, you're not thinking about all of the struggle that went into that. And it kind of just feels like, oh, well, it must have been effortless for them. Why wasn't it effortless for me, you know? Good writing sometimes kind of just feels like it was effortless, even if you can also tell there was a lot of care put into it. You know, when I read books that I love, I'm not thinking, man, this is such a good book. I bet the writer struggled. I bet they cried. I bet they had a million breakdowns to get it here. It's so good that in my mind I'm like, man, I bet they just sat down and wrote this one day and then it was published. Everyone else is gonna seem like they're a more talented, skilled, socially well-adjusted writer because you're not seeing their struggle and you don't have to experience it. Even if you are seeing it, even if they're literally talking about it, you're not feeling it yourself. You know, people send me messages all the time where they seem to assume that I have all my shit together, and that's not true. I write things that I don't like and I can never get them to work. That's just life. That's just how art is. I still love writing and I love my work. And sometimes I feel like I'm the one who is such a mess, whereas everyone else seems to just spit out perfect work all the time, but they're probably struggling just as much as I am. The person that you feel you could never be as good as, they're probably struggling with their art just as much as you are. I think it was from Victoria Schwab who tweeted this recently, and she said, don't compare your rehearsal to somebody else's onstage performance. Similarly to that, number 4, other people's work seems so creative and original because it's coming from their mind. An idea is a very specific, individual, personal thing. It comes from your own personal mind and well of experience, and that's why you, just you, are able to come up with the work you create. No one else ever could create that. So when you read other people's work and it seems so creative, that's because to you it's fresh. That's because your brain doesn't have the capacity to come up with that work. Their brain doesn't have the capacity to come up with your work. Other people could never think of your ideas. They could never create your art. just as you could never create someone else's art. That's why their work seems so creative, because when you never have the capacity to create something, it's of course going to seem creative. When you do have the capacity to create something, it feels almost inherent. So sometimes our work can feel kind of less creative to us than it would to other people, because it was kind of just there for us. 5, this one is so obvious, but people struggle with it so much. Your first draft, or even your second or third or fifth draft, will probably not be as good as a published book, and that's okay. This is like comparing unedited footage to a final movie. It's just not the same. Like, I get a lot of messages from people who say that they pick up books, published books, and they start reading them and they get really discouraged because they think their work will never be as good as this book. It's not the same though. You just can't compare it to a published book. Those books there, they have been through so many drafts, they've gone through editors, probably multiple editors, they've been seen by so many people have worked on it, proofread it, edited it. Your first draft is just straight out of the brain, like it's brand new. It barely knows how to walk yet. It can't support the weight of its own head. It's practically still a fetus. So it's just not comparable to those two things. The only thing holding your book back from not being that good as the published book you're comparing it to is if you don't write it. If you don't write it, it will never get there. If you do keep writing it, it can. Number 6, your brain and your creativity is infinite. Sometimes we get burned out and we have kind of creative dry spells where it seems like nothing is working, but creativity is an infinite well. You don't have a finite number of sentences in you, or a finite number of books, or a finite number of ideas. Sometimes I feel like I do. I feel like I have a limit of how many images are in my mind or how many ideas are in my mind, and that's not true. You, as a creative person, as long as you live, you can always find new things to create. Your brain is infinite. It doesn't mean that they will always be there exactly when you need them, when you call upon them, but you're never gonna hit a limit of creativity. Number 7, there is no perfect story to accompany your idea. This is one I struggle with a lot, so to all the perfectionists out there, I feel like I should share it. It's kind of a realization I had recently. I used to feel like I would get an idea, and somewhere out there, hidden in the folds of multiple dimensions and time and space, there was a perfect version of this story, and what I had to do was create a story that aligned perfectly with it. And I would write a first draft, and this is the perfect story, and my first draft was like, meh. I would get some pieces there, but some other pieces were like, meh. And I felt like there was this perfect version of the story that existed, that was inherent, and what I had to do was find it. It's a math equation, and there's one singular answer. There are literally infinite answers. If the equation is your idea, the answer is whatever you want it to be. There are infinite answers to that question. It's just based on which one you want. I always felt like I was seeking the right answer, but there literally isn't one. The right answer is the answer you choose for it. I used to feel like I would never be able to get a book strong enough because I would never be able to attain that perfect version of the story. That perfect version of the story doesn't exist. The perfect version of the story, and it never will be perfect. It's impossible to write a perfect novel. No such thing. Will be the one that I choose for it. So you can choose the outcome of your story. You can choose which version of the story is the right answer. Number 8. This is one I know a lot of people struggle with. Other people's success does not hurt you. Jealousy can be a really hard thing to deal with. But if you find yourself getting jealous of other people's success or other people's skill, first of all, remember what I talked about earlier. You're not dealing with their struggle. They're probably also struggling. We all struggling here. Other people's success is not bad. Other people's success is not hurting you. If someone is getting published right now, it's not hurting you in your first draft stage. There is space for all of us to be artists here. Being competitive with each other, being jealous of other people, isn't doing anything. You are not in direct competition with anyone. You're all writing different stories, or we're all writing different stories, and those things can all coexist in this world. There is no real quick fix if you feel like this is a mindset you fall prey to frequently, but all I can say is if you notice it, you have to start to work on it and know that it's hurting you. The longer and the more you feed jealousy that you feel, the harder it will be to break out of, and the harder it will be to be really a part of the literary community and even to love your own work, because you're only ever going to be writing your own work in comparison or in competition with other people. That said, number 9, my last point. You have to really actively work on positivity. It will not come to you instantly. If you feel like you have a problem with your confidence or your kind of like your self-image as a writer or your process or whatever, there's no quick fix to that. What you have to do is actively work on it. And everyone has these things. We all do. As creatives, we all have these issues. I've got them. We've all got them. There's no one magical solution that will just solve all of your problems. But if you find that you have negative mindsets that you fall into frequently and that affect you and affect your process, what you have to do is actively challenge it. When you hear those thoughts, you have to say, no, that's irrational. You have to counter it actively. Positivity and happiness and confidence as a writer requires hard work. It requires you to actively fight the bad part of you that wants to win. It's not gonna happen instantly, it's gonna take a long time. So actively work on it. If you find yourself falling into these thoughts, actively say, this isn't rational, this isn't helping me, and counter that with something true and a true, rational, helpful statement. Your own positivity and confidence and kind of emotional health in that way requires you to be a pretty active participant in it. So nothing I really said in this video is gonna solve anyone's problems probably, but the thing that can solve your problems is your active effort in your own improvement. That's everything I want to say in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my pep talks. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr.